Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it's time for another Mondays with Melba. Well, we know that there was an announcement that didn't quite go as planned. There was a little failure to launch there when our dear Florida governor decided to announce his candidacy for president. But I think that's the perfect segue into talking about what happened, what really happened during Florida's legislative session this year. I think it's safe to say that it was unprecedented, the amount of bills that just got rammed through without any debate or discussion. But I don't want to speak on something that I physically wasn't present for. I'm going to let Representative Ashley Gantt, who was in the room fighting for all of us up there in Tallahassee for months, tell us what really happened and how it really went down. So first off, Ashley, thank you so much for coming back on Mondays with Melba. Reintroduce yourself to folks, because I think a lot of folks met you around the time of your campaign and you successfully winning the seat. But if you could remind people of who you are and the district you represent, please.
Okay, so first, thank you so much, Melba, for having me back. I appreciate it. I am Ashley Gantt, state representative for District 109. So if you live in downtown, Overtown, the historic Overtown, Alapata, Liberty City, Brownsville, Westview, West Little River, and Opelika, I have the honor and pleasure of representing you. And so I was elected in August, but I was sworn in November. So I've been state rep since November. And I just came back home from my first legislative session.
Yeah. So, first of all, this is your first legislative session. Was it what you expected? Like, just, not even getting into the actual nitty gritty of the bills, but just your experience as a first time legislator, a first time walking into the Capitol, like, I have an office here. Like what was that experience for you? And was it what you expected, or what was different in terms of what you thought it would be?
So I went in with no expectations, and I was very intentional about that because I knew we were going into a super minority, super majority situation. And I wanted to just take things as it came and not be disappointed, really. And so the goal was to learn. So when we went up for committee weeks, I was observing and people were like, "Are you having fun?" I'm like, "I'm learning." So I love learning, you can interpret that as fun if you want. But I went in with the mindset of, let me learn. Let me figure out what is what. I did not have a transition meeting. My predecessor never reached out, even when I reached out and was like, "Hey, can we at least meet?" Because it's about the community for me. It's not about me. It's not about my ego. I don't really care to be the center of attention a lot of times. I want to advocate for my community.
And by the way, let me just pause there, because it is the norm for the outgoing rep to have a transition meeting with the incoming rep, especially if they're of the same party, right? Correct. And the two of you are of the same party, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So kind of sad that the people of District 109 didn't even get that service as that last one was coming out. So let's just remember that in case somebody wants to come make a comeback.
I fully expect that too.
And that's what I'm gonna put it out there. That's James Bush, and that he was Ashley Gantt's predecessor and didn't have the decency to even sit down to make sure that things that he had started in motion on behalf of the community would continue or anything like that. And that's hella sad. But anyway, continue.
It was very sad, but I was like, okay, you know what? I'm here and I'm pretty smart, so I could figure some things out. And I asked a lot of questions. I reached out to people. I'm not afraid to, say, "Hey, I'm Ashley. I need some help. I understand that you do this." So, thankfully, a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, honestly, were very sympathetic that I never had a transition meeting. So, surprisingly, I got, some really good feedback and advice from Republicans.
Mm.
And so that also helped me with navigating the terrain in Tallahassee, even in such a crazy hostile environment when it came to bills. So I didn't have any expectations. I did get a great office though. That was like cool. And I wanted to learn as much as possible, advocate. And, I think I went up there with the attitude that I'm going to use my voice because it's for my community. And so there were times where I was the lone vote of no on a bill in a committee. And I stood in it because I remembered no one on this day has elected me. My community did. And they elected me to be vocal, to have their best interests first. And even when that came at the expense of me feeling like I was being like going against the current or just not, being a team player, even though it's not about being a team player, but when you're in certain environments, like that pressure is very real. And so
like, just vote yes. What's the big deal? Like,
right,
this is going to pass anyway, so you might as well just vote yes. And it's like, no,
right,
it's the principle. Like,
right.
I'm going to go on record as saying this is not okay.
Correct. And so, sometimes those experiences, they were pretty intimidating, and like I would get really hot, like I would be sweating in a room that was super cold because, I'm human. And so that was a very interesting experience, but I mean what I say and I say what I mean. And I think that I was able to establish a respectful relationship within my caucus and with the other caucus, with the other side of the aisle. And so I came back home exhausted, completely exhausted. It was traumatic, y'all. I'm not even gonna sit here and try to be like, oh no, it was traumatic. When I came home the first night, I was back home in my bed. I was so happy to be back home because let me step back. Committee weeks were January and February for 6 weeks. So I was only home for 2 weeks, the first 2 months of the year.
Wow.
Then I went back in March. And in March, from March to May, I was in Tallahassee. I came back home twice. And so I was gone from my home pretty much the entire first quarter and change of the year. And when I got back and it was my first night in my bed, I sobbed. Like it was like this release. I was happy I was home. I was like, what in the world did I just experience? It was, for trial attorneys, it was that adrenaline of trial for 60 days straight.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I went up there like, okay, I'm gonna read my bills. I read my bills. Did I read every single one? It was some committees where I had to go through and skim, but I read hundreds of pages of bills, took notes, asked questions. They were always like, Rep Gantt has a question. What a surprise. That's right. What a surprise. Here's my question. Okay.
Because most of the time, quick side note, folks don't realize that, there are legislators who won't read the bill. They're just like, well, such and such lobbyist said that I should support this, or such and such special group said, here, this is our bill, support it. Okay. And they're relying on their staff to maybe read and give some top line notes or whatever. But, they're for a legislator to dig into these bills that are like 20, 30 pages long and not written in a way for the, that's easily understood. You're trying to read what's there, and then you got to read in between the lines to see, is there something unintended or an intended consequence that is not obvious on its face? Much like, for instance, the adult entertainment bill that on its face is not about drag bars and drag shows, but in reality could completely target drag shows. But
Correct. So, for people to get an idea of how things work, each representative has 7 bill slots. So we had deadlines to file our bills, and all of our bills has to have a Senate companion. So we had to make sure we had a senator to file the bills with us. Then the next step would be to what they call work your bill to get it on the agenda. So you had to reach out to the chairs, you had to reach out to the speaker, you had to set these meetings, you had to do all of these things at the same time, where your bill, when you file it, the Speaker of the House refers it to different committees. So your bill is typically 3 committees. So you have to start working those and figuring out who is who and what is what, and just navigating the dynamics of politics, professionalism, just all of that. And then being in a super minority status where a lot of the bills that we filed as Democrats were not put on the agenda that could have substantive change, because they were in direct contradiction to what the governor's priorities were with bills that did get on the agenda. And so you had to learn how to balance that, to navigate that. So that's a part, being homesick, not being with your family, and being in this super intense environment where you are always have to be careful about what you say, who you're sending it around, figuring out who to trust, who not to trust. Like it was just really crazy. And then still trying to advocate enough to get money to bring back home to your community for the different appropriations projects that you requested, and trying to get a bill on the agenda and being strategic about that. So yeah, I went in with no expectations because I had no idea. And a lot of people who met me during the campaign were very helpful with giving me their advice. And I had the policy of, I'm not that person that's like, oh, I'll figure it out, I'm good. Tell me your advice. Like, if I ask for it, I'm like, tell me, and I'll take what I can and leave what I don't need. And so that was very beneficial. But I think I did pretty good.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what are some of the positives, because we've covered a lot of the negatives. Well, let me rephrase that. A lot of the negatives have been widely covered in the media, and we've talked about that, and we are going to talk about some of those in a minute. But want to switch, to the positive. Like, what do you feel you've been able to accomplish this session? What good bills, whether it was yours or others, that passed that could really positively impact our community?
So yeah, there were a lot of Democratic bills. Well, there were a lot of Democratic bills that were good for Florida in general. So my first bill that I filed is it was signed into law. So I made it law.
That was awesome.
And my first bill that I filed, and now is a law, is to create lactation spaces in a courthouse. And people, I know, like, yes. People were like, oh, that doesn't exist? No, it doesn't. So the reason first, Senator Berman, thank you so much, Senator Berman, for choosing me to be the House sponsor. It passed last session in the Senate, but the House sponsor, the former House sponsor, she wasn't able to get it agended at all. And so I went in knowing that, like, this needs to happen. It's been an initiative advocated by the Florida Association of Women Lawyers for years, and it never got to move. And so I'm really honored that I was able to get it to the finish line and over the finish line and become a law. Like, I'm elated, because when we think about the 15-week abortion ban, which my predecessor voted for and made it bipartisan, when we think about that ban and how it became a lot more restrictive with the 6-week, that's going to have an impact on women in the workplace. And so if we can start with the courts, right? That's a public building that everyone has access to, attorneys, staff, the public. If we can start there by making the possibility of women coming back to work easier, where if they choose, if it's their choice or their family's choice to breastfeed, and whether it's an economic choice or health choice or both, and we look at the formula for the shortage that we went through, right? Mm-hmm. If we look at that bill directly addresses or alleviates the strain that the abortion restrictions will have on women returning to the workplace after they've given birth. And so I went in with the mindset of I got to be strategic because the numbers are the numbers.
Yeah.
The law that has been passed, even though it's pending litigation. We have people right now that need some type of relief, some type of help. And so because of that being my mindset and the initiative that has been promulgated by by fall for so many years, I knew I had to work really hard to get that over the line. And it did. And it's going to be beneficial to I have so many messages, phone calls, stories in person of women like, thank you so much. And, I was in tears when I had to sit on the floor in the bathroom and pump and then dump the milk because I couldn't take milk that I pumped and was exposed to open air in a public bathroom back home to my baby. Right. And you don't think about these things. And so if it doesn't affect you, right? But if it affects you, you know how traumatic, how disappointing, how helpless you feel in those situations when you can't even give your baby sustenance. Yeah. When you return to work. And that's on top of the separation that women and mothers feel when they have to leave their baby to return to work.
At like 2 months, right? Like you don't get the proper, like you see in Scandinavian countries, a whole year that you can take off to be with your child. And then your partner gets a year to be able to take off and be with the child. So that's a whole nother shebang, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's the type of strategy and the strategic approach that I wanted to take. Mm. And so that's one law. Another one was by Rep. Campbell and Rep. Driscoll, Leader Driscoll, for sickle cell research that directly impacts Black and Brown communities, primarily Black communities, but funding different sickle cell centers that we have around the state of Florida, and also creating a research arm that gives us more information and can track the cases of sickle cell. And that's very personal to me because my little cousin, she passed away at 20 and she lived her life with sickle cell and the challenges that came with that. So it was my honor to vote for that for Tennille, and her name will live on. And, I will continue to be an advocate for her and for her mom and dad, Terry and Ramon, who are absolutely phenomenal parents. And so that was a bright spot. The diaper tax by Rep. Escamani, the expansion of Medicaid for children by Rep. Bartleman. It was different laws from Democrats that were really important. Grayson's law by Rep. Cassell that ensures that Grayson is the last child that has to pass away really from the court not being able to intervene in a violent situation when it comes to parents and time sharing. And so, there were bright spots, 100%. Rep. Benjamin, he added an accountability measure to the African-American history in school so that not only is it just, it has to be taught, but now you have to show that you taught it.
Nice. Okay.
So, there were, and we were working these bills, and it was not easy. And so those were bright spots in a session where we were fighting. Okay. We were on the battlefield at the front line. I was a Marine Corps member on the front lines, reading those bills, writing questions, making sure that we have it documented on the record. So when these unconstitutional laws are challenged, legislative intent is clear.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there were some laws it was one about MDX, the state taking over MDX when we legally cannot, that I was like, legislative intent, here you go. This is illegal. You can't do it. Mm-hmm. And so those are the type of battles that the battles that we have, but those are our strategies. Like, how can we be as effective as possible? And we were really effective because it was common sense legislation that helps everyone. And that was our approach. Like, those were the bright spots for sure.
So then moving to the negative, Again, lots of media coverage around, oh my gosh, DEI and just everything. Gutting insurance, gutting tort claims, the ability to sue if you've been injured, the ability to sue if a loved one's been killed, the ability to sue the insurance companies if they don't fully cover your damages for hurricanes. I mean, all of that is being gutted. But are there any dangerous laws that have been, or bills that have now been signed into law or about to be signed into law, that have flown under the radar? Because there's some big ones, right? Again, DEI, all of this, like that takes up a lot of the space. But there could be other laws that came into play that, again, people didn't pay as much attention to, kind of slept on it, and it has a very adverse effect for our community. So it's just, out of curiosity, if anything popped up in that lane.
Absolutely.
You're like all of it. You're like all of it.
So one I'll talk about is a preemption bill. I can't remember the bill number, but the sponsor was Representative Esposito. It was a 2-page bill that preempted landlord-tenant relationships to the state. And why is that dangerous? The Tenants Bill of Rights that we passed in Miami-Dade County, it's no more. The rent stabilization that Orange County passed, it's no more. So all of these efforts, we say we want our citizens to be involved in the democratic process. And when they did it, and they did something that they knew they needed, and that was particular to their areas, they came back and they preempted it. And I asked this question several times. So I saw that bill in committee and I asked this question. And when it was on the floor, I asked it again. So the Tenants Bill of Rights in Miami-Dade County will not be effective anymore after this bill. No. And her response, which was pretty flippant, but I'm gonna hold her to it, and I'm gonna make sure I pull that video from the Florida channel so I could play it back. She said, well, if one of your constituents come to you and they ask you, well, you can just introduce legislation on their behalf next session. I said, thank you. I hope you are going to co-sponsor this legislation. And, I didn't take it to heart, because honestly, when people started, when you get a response like that, it means that you got them to answer a question that they have no idea how to recover from. So it's all good. Like, oh, that was a good question then. So I will be offering legislation next session to mimic the Tenants Bill of Rights from Miami, because that's beneficial for all of the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. So that's one. There was another bill, fees in lieu of security deposits. So that bill I was against the entire time, because last year, my predecessor did vote for it, but last year there was no regulation at all. So they brought it back and they put some measures in there, but it's still a poor tax. Landlords still have no guardrails on how much money they can charge for these fees. They can charge $500. And if you couldn't afford that couple of thousands of dollars at the beginning, and you're paying all this money, that money is gone. It goes nowhere. It just goes to them and these companies. And you're still on the hook for the fees if any damage was caused that they allege. So even if it's beyond regular wear and tear, you have to pay for that. So it's
just to clarify for folks, though, remember, this is if you can't afford your security deposit, because when you move into an apartment, it's first, last, and security, right? Mm-hmm. And it's usually 3 months. So if you can't afford, the 3 months, instead of coming up with that lump sum, you can do almost like an installment plan, but it's not like an installment as in, okay, and when you get to $1,500, you're done. No. It's for as long as you're there, you're going to be paying the landlord. So it's not like they're collecting, over time what they needed up front. They're collecting what they needed up front and then some, and are just lining their pockets, which again, in an affordable housing crisis, how does this make sense? How does this help people?
Correct. And if you want to convert, so if you're doing the fee, you get in and you're like, okay, I need to just pay the fee so I can get into place. Fine. You do have the option of converting over to paying the security deposit. That money is still gone. Okay. And you also have the option of paying towards the security deposit and paying the fees at the same time. That money is still gone.
So even when you move out, you don't get your security deposit back.
So if you choose to transition over back to the security deposit, then it's a traditional security deposit. But that money you've already paid for the fees is gone. And if you do them in tandem, the money for the fees is still gone, but you pay towards the security deposit, and then you're there. And so, when asked by myself and other Democratic caucus members, well, can we make an option in the amendment in the form of an amendment, to have the fees go to the security deposit? It was like, well, landlords can do that anyway if they want to. And it's, I know. So, that was one that I think is flying under the radar. Another bad, horrible, terrible one is the death penalty bill that made. So you got to have a unanimous jury verdict for guilt. But if you're sentencing someone to death, it doesn't have to be unanimous. And that's in contradiction to Supreme Court law. Like,
Yeah, and shout out to Allison Miller, who came on a little while ago to talk about how dangerous this is. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, definitely watch the video, the Mondays with Melba, that I did with her, because she breaks down chapter and verse why this is so problematic, and the fact that it's just not constitutional because of the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States was like, no, you've got to have unanimous juries and unanimous verdicts, like, period. So,
yeah. And then the last one I'll mention is, like, they made the death penalty applicable to sex crimes. And there was a lot of consternation with, how am I going to vote, blah, 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 with different people. But as a criminal defense attorney, Supreme Court law, established law, says you can't apply the death penalty to a sex case. Like, no one has died in that case, with the understanding that that is a horrible,
of course,
horrible crime. And I made this, I say this all the time, I don't do sex cases because I don't have the Constitution to do it. I don't, as a criminal defense attorney. But y'all are going against the actual established, well-settled constitutional law. And so, things like that happened a lot, whereas this is what case law says. So why are we going against
doing this?
Yeah, to go ahead and challenge. And, and I said this several times in committee and on the floor. Oh, so we already saw the example of Roe v. Wade. We know what the playbook is. Mm-hmm. And, we're not under any guise of, we just think this is constitutional. No, you're trying to create a challenge.
Yep.
Let's see. There were so many bills, child. It was so many bills, but those are the ones I can think off the top of my head that I made sure I voted against.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Again, I mean, this does not help the average Floridian. There were so many other things that we should have been focusing on, including, being able to provide insurance relief for homeowners in the state, being able to find housing just for people, because we have, not only do we have a housing shortage, we're about to have a worker shortage too. So that's going to, as a result of these immigration bills. So that's a whole other thing. But, there were so many key issues that Floridians never had addressed this session because of presidential ambition. But be that as it may, what should we be on the lookout for next legislative session? Because we're going to blink and it's going to be, the end of the year. Session starts in January again. Sorry, Ashley, but please rest. But, what should we be keeping our eyes on for next session, and how can folks get involved?
So we start in committee weeks in September. So I have a little snapshot, and I'll be going back and forth to Tallahassee from September to December before we go back in January. I am, again, going with no expectations, because I just think it's going to be crazy. Well, let me go back. I think it's just going to be crazy. That's my only expectation. I think it's going to be the same extremism. How can we get involved? We need people knocking on the door. Oh, but I'm sorry. Let me pause for a second. There was more voter suppression in an elections bill that was passed as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that bill restricts third-party organizations tremendously. It imposes an obscene fine. It it does a lot, and I cannot remember everything off the top of my head, but the elections bill that passed was not good. I will be talking about that bill on the 19th with the Faith in Florida town hall that I'll be speaking with Senator Tracy Davis out of Jacksonville about the bill. And so that is one that we have to definitely be on the lookout, because when you talk about freedom and democracy, that includes access, right, to the ballot. And we're continuously, not we, they, and I happen to be part of the body, they are continuously eroding the ability to have access to the ballot. And so that's also one thing that is that people need to be aware of. How do we get involved? We need people to, one, volunteer. We need people to run for office. Not everybody, but don't be afraid. It's going to be one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing you ever do. But we can't be the generation that fails our children. And I don't even have kids, okay? But I'm like, the next generation deserves a chance. So volunteer. You can volunteer with different campaigns. You can knock on doors. If you don't have money, so donate, because it takes a lot of money, and it's a lot of money on the other side to, disenfranchise. Donate, even if it's $20, that helps. I will have an election next year, so you can donate to me. You can donate right now. Ashley.vote. You can go on there and you can donate now. But I'm going to need people to help me knock on doors, because I don't know if people know this, but every single voter in the state of Florida that voted by mail, you were purged off the vote by mail list. Yep. So now you have to re-register, and you're going to have to do that after every election cycle. So every 2 years, you're going to have to re-register in order to get your vote by mail ballot. So you can register now. You could go on the Miami-Dade Supervisor of Elections website. You could do that. So what we need the voices. We need the community. Apathy is going to kill our community. It is killing our community. The reason we're in the super minority now is because people just didn't show up. And that's because of apathy. And I was always like I voted, right? But I wasn't super 100% into politics. I didn't follow this and that and whatever. If it was someone I knew, that's when I was knocking on doors. But we can't afford not to be engaged, because whether you like it or not, these laws are at your front door, even in your house. They are all around you, and you can't escape it. So you need to be involved, and you need to use your voice. And especially if you have children, what future are you creating for your children? Is your apathy going to all the work you're doing as a parent to give your child a different chance or opportunity? Is it going to be for naught because they've created laws that will either restrict your child, erase your existence so your child won't even know who they are, erase your child's ability to be who they are, to have a job, to go to school? Like, all of these things are very real. So if the alarm wasn't sounded before, ring, ring, I'm sounding the alarm now.
Yes.
We can't afford to be apathetic, and we absolutely cannot afford not to show up at the ballot. So that's how you can be involved. I will be opening my district office soon. That has also been a challenge. So when we talk about unaffordability, I couldn't even find a place that I can afford based on the state's stipend to me. So thankfully, I'll shout out Commissioner Keon Hardeman. He has worked with me and been advocating for me to get a space at the Joseph Caleb Center. So this is premature announcement, but I'm putting it into the universe, speaking it into existence, that I will have my office open in June. And I'm excited to hit the ground running when the office is open. I've already been out in the community, but that will be, just a centralized location for community to come and ask how they can be involved. And also I have a legislative update on the 30th with Senator Jones at St. Matthew's Church in Liberty City. It is on all of my social media platforms, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And I'm on TikTok, but that's not on TikTok yet. But it's on all of those, and the information, the link to register to attend the event is also on there.
Awesome. Ashley Gantt, thank you so much for joining us on Mondays with Melba. Thank you for your service to the community and for fighting the good fight in Tallahassee. And we look forward to having you back on again soon to talk about key issues affecting our community. Y'all, I will be dropping the link to Ashley's website in the comments, as well as dropping the link in terms of re-registering to get your vote by mail ballot. To be clear, you don't lose your voter registration, you just lose the ability to vote by mail, which means you would have to go in person, either early vote, which is now, I believe they've reduced the amount of days you can early vote. So either you go in person to early vote or you vote on election day, which again, lines, heat, things to think about. So if you want to vote from the comfort of your home, you have to make sure to go back and re-register to vote by mail. So I will drop those links in the comments as well. Y'all take good care. Ashley, get some rest, and we will all talk soon. Bye, y'all.
Bye.